Are you busy? Well, not too busy to enjoy your pets, are you? But who likes finding urine or stool on the floor? You know, if that happens at your house, your dog isn't happy either. The canine senior, this is not a training issue. It's a problem that needs medical attention. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. In case we haven't met, I'm veterinarian Dr. Jeff Nickel, along with Miss America, the Nickel family border collie, and Gaston and Tony. And we're not really talking about cats tonight, but you know, it's kind of a routine here on Thursday evenings. These jokers show up on the table and they want snacks. And you know, it always happens. They get snacks. Whoops, goodness gracious. It's gone. So, thank you for joining me. And if you can hear me loud and clear, just to confirm that we have no technical issues, please hit the wow button so that I know. And if you find this information helpful, send me some hearts. That way I know I'm being useful. You don't have a dog at home who does this, a senior dog. Well, if your dog's 8+, 8 years to older, I would suggest paying close attention to this because you're going to learn things that may develop as your dog ages. And that doesn't have to be a disaster. Recognizing the problem and getting an accurate diagnosis really makes treatment possible, and a lot of these things respond very well to treatment. So, if you know somebody who could benefit from this, then put their name in the comment line and they'll get notified. And of course you can send them a link to this. You can also encourage your friends or your family to subscribe to my website, drjeffnickel.com. At the bottom of the homepage you can subscribe for free. And every Tuesday morning you'll get my Facebook Live from the week before, plus my weekly media blog, which of course is my newspaper column from the Albuquerque Journal. So let me get started with this thing by reading you a question. Speaking of the Albuquerque Journal, I write a column every week, have since 1996. It was about a little bit earlier than Cindy. Excellent, thank you for coming. I'm delighted you're here, as always. But this was a question that I answered in my column, not in 1996. It was actually about a year and a half ago. And I thought it really fit this situation because this is a rather complex case. They aren't all this difficult. My sweet dog and best friend Isaac was diagnosed with cognitive dysfunction syndrome, which, by the way, is nearly identical to Alzheimer's in people. So much so that dogs are a very highly valued research model for that problem in humans, which is affecting more people all the time. She said she watched my video on cognitive dysfunction. I've got a whole lot of stuff on my YouTube channel, and it meant so much, which I'm really glad to be helpful. Isaac is a 15-year-old, and this is a breed from, I think, Finland, and it's Kukurhoji, something like that. Starts with a K. Anyway, I am absolutely heartbroken. His symptoms are constant barking, confusion, losing control of bowel movements, and pacing at night. He has lost his hearing and is showing signs of eyesight problems. My veterinarian prescribed acepromazine, Xanax, Prozac, and he's been on Tramadol for pain. In your video, you mentioned Purina NeuroCare diet, fish oil, SAM-E, and melatonin for restlessness at night. Can these supplements be added to the current medications? I am dedicated to walking Isaac at least 2 times a day. We play and he does food puzzles, which he loves. I mean, this lady is doing so many good things. I think it was a lady. Anyway. Oh, thank you, Carolyn. And so this way I can see people's questions. And I really encourage you to send me your questions if you have any, by the way, and interrupt me anytime. I don't care. Ask me anything. And tell me you're here, like Cindy did, and tell me where you're from in case we haven't connected on a Facebook Live in the past. It's always helpful to know where people are and what's going on. So I responded and said, Isaac is mighty special to you. And I'm that way with my dog, and I can assure you that I am, and my cats too. They're a part of us, which makes their aging really hard sometimes. And there are more ways to help the good Isaac. A supplement called Senilife. Let me show you this stuff. And I'll turn the camera around here. This is a supplement that you can get online. This particular one is Senilife XL, which is meant for bigger dogs. There's regular Senilife for smaller dogs. And Senilife is a combination of antioxidants that make a huge difference. I turned off there we go. Which make a huge difference in the oxidative damage to the neurons, the functional nerve cells in the brain, that of course have everything to do with thinking and making decisions and memory. And just like Alzheimer's in people, one of the biggest problems that we see with cognitive dysfunction or dementia in dogs is they forget stuff. Very often it's dogs who had been very well trained to basic commands, and they forget that stuff. And one of the common reasons why many of these elderly dogs with cognitive decline, dementia, start to house soil is that they were very well house trained previously, I mean bulletproof, and then they forgot. Now there are other causes, and we'll talk about that in a little while, issues with the joints and the back and a variety of bladder and lower bowel problems that can certainly confuse the picture. But when it is dementia, aging disorder, aging disease of the brain, it's often a memory issue, and by her very detailed description of Isaac, it's mighty clear that this dog, the veterinarian, made the accurate diagnosis on this thing of what we call cognitive dysfunction syndrome, or abbreviated CDS. Anyway, so the Senilife, the antioxidants in Senilife can make a very big difference. And of course, treatment, we've got a lot of treatments, and we'll talk about those here in the next couple of minutes for cognitive dysfunction. And some dogs respond remarkably well. I have a couple of cases of dogs who weren't too advanced, and like pretty much everything we treat, if we deal with it early, we can make a bigger difference. But we find that with older dogs with cognitive dysfunction, people recognize the indicators early, then very often we can buy them more than just a few months. We can sometimes get a year, even 18 months. I have one case that's pushing 2 years now, where the dog has advanced, but only a little, and they're still playing and enjoying a good life. And that's music to my ears. And of course, there are some that don't respond at all, but every single one is worth taking a serious run at helping them out. And as much as there's a whole bunch of treatments that we apply, most of them are supplements and diet changes. There's one prescription medication that can make a difference if we use it early, but frankly it's kind of expensive and sometimes we don't see great results with it. And these supplements, like the Senilife, can make a big difference. Now, I'm not encouraging you to go out and order stuff like Senilife if you say, gee, cognitive dysfunction, Isaac sounds like my dog. Maybe I should just go out there and get this stuff. Well, again, we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but there are a lot of other problems elsewhere in the body, and some of them in the brain as well, that can confuse you. And if you say, well, I'm just going to treat for cognitive dysfunction and see what happens, and if my dog doesn't respond, then I'll take him in for an exam to see his veterinarian. I advise against that because you can be wasting valuable time. Because regardless of what the cause of an older dog's symptoms are, whether it's leaving stool and urine around the house or confusion, if we fiddle around trying to try this and try that and finally get competent medical attention for the dog, by that time the problem's advanced and our outlook, our likelihood of getting a good result is diminished. So don't mess around. I'm educating people here, but I'm certainly not prescribing, and I don't want you to take any of my comments as a diagnosis. We want the best, and early diagnosis and treatment really matter. So I also suggested that she add something called theracumin, Theracumin. If you've ever heard of the spice cumin, it's used in East Indian foods. Well, it wasn't that many years ago when researchers, people who were researching the causes and possible treatments for Alzheimer's, and that's a very hot area of research now, they started looking at populations of people around the world, and they found that people who live in East India, born and raised of that race, have a remarkably low incidence of Alzheimer's. Well, so, there may be a genetic factor in that, but they also looked at their diet. And if they are people who are still eating the traditional East Indian diet, which relies heavily on the spice turmeric, it's kind of a hot and spicy kind of thing if you've ever had it. I like it a great deal. People who don't like spicy food aren't that crazy about it. But turmeric is a very cool spice. And those folks, who eat the traditional foods and have their whole life, well, they get a lot older than most of the people around the world, and their risk of Alzheimer's is exceptionally low. Well, it turns out, and they're still working on why, but the cumin or curcumin, which is the active ingredient in the spice turmeric, is actually has value in reducing oxidative damage to the neurons, the nerve cells of the brain. Well, you can just buy that spice and put it on your dog's food, but most of them aren't going to eat it because dogs aren't really that crazy about spicy dishes. So you can buy a capsule, and the capsule is called, theracumin. I drew a blank, sorry. And theracumin is not especially cheap, but it is a biologically active form that is very well absorbed and really does the job. And when we treat a dog with cognitive dysfunction, there's a list of things we add in, not necessarily everything, because some dogs don't have sleep-wake problems at night, for example. Some of them don't have significant anxiety, etc. But the things that we always use is the Senilife and the theracumin that is so valuable. And those two things, I believe, are one of the reasons that we're starting to see improvements in these older dogs much earlier in the course of treatment. It used to take 2 or 3 months, and now we're starting to see improvements, thank you for the hearts, in a few weeks, in many of these cases, not all of them. So the theracumin is also a great way to increase memory, is largely the benefit that we get from it. SAM-E, S-A-M, it's uppercase S-A-M, and then hyphen lowercase e, and you may have heard of it. It's available, you find it anywhere on the internet, vitamin stores, many pharmacies have it on the shelf. But the stuff that's meant for humans, in many cases, is not well enough absorbed in the dog. So we use a brand of SAM-E that is intended for dogs and absorbs very, very well, and it improves the function of the brain. It is a chemical, it's S-adenosylmethionine, SAM-E, which is found in every living cell, and when we supplement with it, brain function improves significantly. And this is one of a couple of brands of veterinary SAM-E. And this is what I dispense to pets who have this problem, cognitive dysfunction. And I have found it to be very helpful. And again, it's one of those things where we use the canine approved, and we see improvements much faster than people who say, what the heck, I'm going to save some money and use the human generic form, which you can, beats the heck out of nothing, but we sometimes don't get as good a result. So I went on to explain to this lady who wrote this letter about anxiety being such a common problem with cognitive dysfunction dogs. Now, we see a lot of anxiety as an essential driver of many behavior disorders in dogs and cats, but typically dogs with cognitive dysfunction who become anxious, well, through most of their adult life, they didn't have that problem. But it's the death of neurons in the brain, and it's the inflammation in the brain, and it's largely an inflammatory disorder that we start to see anxiety. And so the veterinarian who was treating Isaac had prescribed Prozac and Xanax. Both of these are safe in dogs. However, in many older dogs, not all of them, but in many of them, we can get constipation from the Prozac. The fluoxetine is the generic name. And so I tend to deal with the anxiety in these dogs with aging brain disease a little differently. We use often an anti-anxiety medication called gabapentin, very inexpensive, very safe. It is a prescription. Your veterinarian would need to prescribe that. We also use a longer-acting benzodiazepine from the same class as Xanax, Valium in that class, and it's called Clonazepam, or Klonopin is the brand name. And Clonazepam, if you get it generic, it works fine in dogs, and it's longer-acting. And so for many of these dogs who are anxious throughout the day, and people have to go to work, whether you're working at home right now or not, you can often get 6 or 8 hours out of Clonazepam, where others in that class, like Xanax or Valium, often a few hours is all you're going to get. So we made some changes. This dog was also prescribed a tranquilizer called acepromazine, And the behavior specialty, we've pretty much closed the door on that stuff. It is a sedative. By itself, you generally don't need to sedate a dog. Kind of dulls the mind, and there is very little anti-anxiety benefit to it. So it's probably not the best thing for Isaac, the 15-year-old, however you say the breed, the Kukujahoji. Sorry, I'm monolingual. English is the only thing I can get by with. They also, he dispensed, the doctor, or she, dispensed a pain reliever called Tramadol. We have new information on Tramadol. Many dogs do not metabolize it the way we assumed that they had, so we're using other things for joint pain, and there's a bunch of those. But the thing about Tramadol as well is that if we're also going to use the SAMe, the Denicil, using it with Tramadol, there can be a conflict, and it can be frankly dangerous. So we've got to be very careful about how we put this thing together. But typically older dogs with cognitive dysfunction, just like a lot of older folks, the joints are not doing as well as we'd like. And we want to improve quality of life, not just cognitively, but we want them to feel good and manage their pain. So we custom fit these things. So the Tramadol would be okay, but with the SAMe, we're going to have to use something different, something like carprofen. So, you know, I went on to tell her that cognitive dysfunction syndrome is a lot like Alzheimer's in people, and we can help many affected dogs feel better, but it is a degenerative brain disease, and we have to be very clear that just like people, it is always terminal. Nobody gets a cure. We can hold the line on it in many cases for a long time, and again, if we do these things right, we often see many of these dogs improve pretty significantly, but ultimately they do go downhill. And so, you know, with aging, our pets, they just don't last long enough, do they? But we're going to make every medically sound effort to improve quality of life every step of the way. But those food puzzles that Isaac is enjoying, those are really valuable. And in fact, I'm going to make myself a note here that on my Facebook page, when I'm done with this Facebook Live, I'll put a link to an excellent source of food puzzles where these dogs can use their brain and stress their brain. And that actually causes some areas of the white matter of the brain, which are usually not necessarily involved in cognitive thought, to actually change and morph into a gray matter cell. And that's part of the reason why, interestingly, people who don't retire and keep working and continue learning throughout their adult life and taking courses. You don't necessarily have to have advanced college degrees when you're in your 20s and 30s, but if you continue to challenge your brain and learn and keep working or doing something that isn't just repetitive but really causes you to stress yourself and think, well, that's what these puzzles, these food puzzles, do for older dogs, because they have to forage in order to survive in the wild, and you're requiring them to do something canine specific. So food puzzles and those brisk walks that she's doing with Isaac at least a couple of times a day, you don't want to push him too hard. He's an older guy, no climbing Mount Everest, but if you a couple of brisk walks a day, that not only helps the joints, by the way, but the brain too. And a few of these things we're not 100% clear on why they help. We know with muscle exertion we often get more production of the neurotransmitter serotonin, and that can make a difference with anxiety. But we actually get better brain function with structured, twice daily, brisk exercise. Nothing real heavy duty. Well, so what else could be going on here? You know, your dog is urine soiling or fecal soiling. Well, dropping stools, you know, again, many of these dogs have forgotten their house training skills, but we'll sometimes see dogs whose hips are pretty painful. Now, plenty of joints can get painful and degenerate as a dog ages, but the hips are the big ones, especially in bigger dogs. And having to squat to defecate or to urinate can be very hard. And getting up and getting through a dog door, or going to the door and asking to be let out, or coming to the person to say, hey, I need to go out, like most dogs will, it's just too darn painful. And so back to pain management. That's really important. And we have so many great ways of treating pain nowadays for older dogs. So you need to see your veterinarian with that dog. And the first thing you think is, well, which joint and how affected are they, and should we take x-rays? Well, x-rays, of course, are a wonderful diagnostic tool, and our software nowadays makes it so much better to miss nothing. But if you've got an older dog who's painful, and we can find it on exam, and we can see it when we observe the pet walking, x-rays can be helpful, but are we going to do surgery? Well, once they get to be 12, 13, 14, most of those surgical problems that would have been surgical when they were much younger, we don't see the kind of good recovery. So I don't have anything against what we call a therapeutic trial. And that means that, okay, I've got an arthritic or suspicious arthritic dog or cat, then should we try a 1-week trial with a pain reliever and see if it makes a difference? If it makes no difference at all, then maybe we better roll up our sleeves and get serious about a diagnosis. But on the other hand, if it makes a very noticeable difference, then we need to stay with it and pick something safe. Some of these things are safe for long-term use. Some of them we better watch our lab profiles to make sure the liver and the kidneys aren't getting into trouble. We've got to be careful with these aging pets. But we can make a difference in nearly all of them, in part because we've got so many choices. We now have acupuncture, we have class 4 laser therapy, physical therapy. In Albuquerque, we have certified physical therapists for pets with these tanks that they swim them in that make a huge difference. Stuff you do at home. So don't let the pain get in the way, but it needs to be considered if you've got a dog who's soiling in the house. But the other thing that many older dogs will do is start drinking more water. And they can do that because they have diabetes. They can have a problem with the adrenal glands called Cushing's syndrome. They can have problems with their liver that can cause them to drink excessively. But the big thing in older dogs, and especially in older cats, that causes excessive drinking and excessive production of urine is kidney failure. And back to those joints, if you're drinking a lot of water and you're producing a lot of urine in the bladder and you've got to go out more often and your old joints are a problem and your family is asleep, you might have to urinate inside. And many of these older dogs don't have cognitive dysfunction. They're just as sharp as ever, and it is highly stressful for them to be soiling in the house. And that's why I mentioned it at the beginning. If you think about their well-being, how do they feel about this? They have an innate sense that we don't soil our living area, and we can't do anything about that. So when you notice a dog doing that, dropping stool or urine, think, wait a minute, this dog used to know what to do. This is not a training problem. Now, if it's cognitive dysfunction, maybe those skills were forgotten, but we don't retrain that, and we certainly would never punish it. We have to say, all right, why has this change occurred? And so a good veterinarian is going to look at all the possibilities, submit a blood profile and a urinalysis, do a digital rectal exam, see if there are any masses back there. Those occur around the anal glands sometimes, and that can cause dogs to retain stool, and then they got to let it go all of a sudden. So these older pets, they need special consideration because there are problems that they are very prone to getting that are essentially never seen in a much younger dog. So all of us, including pet parents and the veterinarians, we have to shift our thinking with an older pet. So, and of course the other problem many times in female dogs, like this little girlfriend of mine right here, if they're spayed, they have a 20% chance of losing control of their bladder sphincter. Usually happens within about 6 months of spaying, so usually much younger dogs. But it started happening to Miss America here when she was about 11. And at night while she was sleeping, she wet her bed. I had no idea. And they get up and they go, oh my goodness, what did I do? I don't do that. Well, again, I care about how she feels. I don't want her upset, for crying out loud. I love this dog. And furthermore, who wants the mess and the smell and, you don't want that in your house. So we checked a urinalysis, and of course I checked blood profiles on her twice a year, because she's 13 now. I don't want to miss anything I can manage. And so we ruled out everything else, and about the only thing left was what's called urethral, easy for me to say, urethral sphincter muscle incompetence, or spay incontinence, or spay leaking, if you like. We all know what we're talking about. And there's a once-a-day chewable tablet called Proin. I could have brought that upstairs. Proin. And we don't just use that. We do some diagnostic work, rule out other things, and get it under control. There's a synthetic estrogen that we can use for some of these. So there are treatments for pretty much all of this. And so I don't want anybody to believe that, oh, my dog's doing this and stuff. We just have to put up with it or lose their patience. You know, here's the thing. We've all got our own needs, don't we? And I certainly notice my own and my family, but my pets too. And if any of us in our dealings with anybody, whether it's our cats or our dogs or our friends or our spouse, and we only try to get our needs met first, and we don't look out for what's best for the other person or the other pet, walk a mile in their shoes, have some empathy, then they can actually become obstinate because they know that we're not looking out for their needs and we're only trying to get our own met. Like, hey, I don't want this messy house, and lose your patience. And boy, I get it. I mean, we're all busy, right? And who needs it? And many of us are kind of stressed and anxious right now because of this darn coronavirus pandemic. Well, actually, you can feel better by saying to Miss America or Tony or Gaston or your family, your human family, and say, all right, let's figure out what's going on, and maybe go see a doctor. And what's this really going to take to figure this out and help them out? Because I'll tell you what, when I give my best effort, and it's one of the best things I love about practicing veterinary medicine. I've been in this game for 45 years now, and you don't win them all. You know, some of these pets, I don't care what we're treating, whatever physical disorder, whatever behavior disorder, some of them do great, some of them do only somewhat better, and a few of them don't do well at all. And that's part of my life, and I've accepted that a long time ago. But giving it my best effort, and the pet parents who bring their pets to me, they know they're getting the most thorough care, because if I don't have the answer, I'm going to find the answer. I'm going to talk to a colleague, another specialist. We'll get it done. And we come away knowing that we've done everything we can to bring out the best in somebody else. We feel better too. So thank you for those hearts. I hope all of this is valuable. And I'm glad you don't mind me pontificating a little bit at the end of these things. So, you know, pets can learn any time that we're in this game to help them out. Even if we might have had a rough relationship with that pet earlier, it's never too late for them to say, you're okay, we'll start again. And that's one of the best things about pets, isn't it? They always forgive, and they never leave us. There's a friendship you can have with a cat or a dog that no human can quite replicate that, can they? So thank you for sharing this time with me. Next Thursday I won't be here. I'm taking a vacation. A friend of mine and myself, we go back to our early days in practice. He's a physician, a psychiatrist, and we met while I was at my first year of practice, and he was doing his residency in psychiatry, and we've been thick as thieves ever since. Done a lot of backpacking in the backcountry, and we're going to southern Colorado. Going to do some fly fishing. Hope to catch the big one, and just kick back and take a whole week off. So I won't be here next week. I'll be here the week following. So I'll miss you guys. So thank you. And again, if you want my weekly Facebook Live and my weekly media blog, you know, again, my column in the Albuquerque Journal, you'll get it in your email box every Tuesday morning. All you have to do is go to my website, drjeffnicol.com, drjeffnicol.com, and put your email address in there, and you can subscribe, no charge. And when you do, I'll send you my free at-home pet first aid and CPR guide. And I've got another question. Oh, I can read it on the iPad. I don't have to squint into the iPhone. Oh, there we go. Oh, Diane, enjoy your trip. Well, thank you. Thank you. My wife and I were going to have a really nice vacation this spring, and we all know why we didn't take that vacation. And we've never done this before, where we're going to take time off separately because there's no other way to do it this year. But next year, we're going to get vaccinated. We're optimistic, and we're going to go have a really nice time. Go on another cruise, I think, something like that. That would be great. So thanks, everybody. And Miss America says good night, and Tony T says good night, and Gaston's over there, you know, licking his paw, because that's what cats have to do. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to send them to me on my Facebook page, and sometimes even end up in my newspaper column. And I think somebody else just sent me a question. I think that's everybody. Diane, thank you, and Cindy, thank you for your well wishes, and see you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks.